Okay, give me just a couple moments here. Pull out the chat. And then... Ping! Good evening. And welcome back to the show. As the title says, we're finishing up the Aslan we started last Sunday. This is a Patreon sculpt for a patron. So, be aware it is going to be available in the patron file vault next Sunday. Also, later this evening, I'll be putting the Orc Anti-Paladin up from last Sunday. Now, there are people who wanted to see it, and I'm pretty sure people who wanted to compare it. This is how the Orc Anti-Paladin came out on my Anycubic Photon. Compare it to the old Orc Warlord I made a little over a year ago. And it's more heavily armored. The shoulder pads might have been a bit bigger. Could have stuck them out a bit more. The face has about at least as much character, but this is an FDM print. This is a resin print. So, put that back up over here, and put this up over here. Also, some people wanted to see how the Flesh Golem from Thursday turned out. And he turned out pretty good too. He's a bit more intimidating than I pictured him, but he does have that kind of hulking pose to him. Yeah, there we go. The stitches came out nicely. The wrinkles in the pants and the tears in the pants. The rope. The tubes in his back. Yeah, he came out pretty nice. Now, if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, which most of you at this point probably are, don't forget the whole like, subscribe, bell icon, the usual YouTuber spiel. And Anycubic Photon, as I just demonstrated, does amazing for miniatures. And while we're waiting on people to show up, I'm also going to show something else that does amazing for miniatures, at least in my current viewpoint. These watercolor paints are coming out pretty good. There's some aspects I don't like and a couple shades I don't like. But I can't name a single brand of paint that is not that way. And I see a Carlton getting ready to try and sneak on over here. You can see him. Anyway, just as an example, what I did was I took 3 of my painting practice figures. One primed white, as you can see by the base, one primed gray, and one primed black. Oh, turn around there, yeah. And I've painted each one using these same colors and techniques. Now, they are not quite finished yet. They are nearly so. What I've done is I've given them their base coats, their highlights, their washes, and some touch-ups. I have not finished those touch-ups. For example, the eyes, the shading to make the mouth area bluer, and the, make this area bluer, make this area redder, I also haven't finished, after I'm done with everything, the base rims, like the white one, are going to be retouched up the color that they are. And the backs of the and the faces of the shields are going to be touched up with the color that they are. Now you'll notice that hair is pretty shiny. That's a watered down ink wash on these hairs. Same thing with and it's a basic wash on the blue, and you'll notice, or ink wash, you'll notice that it's also very shiny. A lot of the inks from the set are quite shiny. The paints and glazes not so much, but the inks very much so. You'll also notice that I have finished, well, when it'll zoom in, I have finished the gem and most of the metals. The gem is various shades of red. You see, what this paint line does with color, just to pull out, oh, let's say warm gray. Right. Let's say cool gray. Because it's right on the top of my box here. In addition to all your basic technical colors, inks, one-shots, fluorescents, etc., for the actual basic colors, it does an array. Get back here. It does an array of 5. With the higher the number, the brighter the shade. Hey, Mark. So, for example, on the screen, on the far right here, that's cool gray 5, whereas here is cool gray 1. That's the grays. It becomes a bit more evident exactly what they're doing, because when it's a color that actually has a tone to it, you'll see it actually changing what tone it is. Let's use the violet, for example. All of these are violet. Okay? But you will notice that the next to last one has a much more bluish tinge. Well, you might notice. This one has a much more bluish tinge than the others. The others are quite a nice medium, almost grape purple, ranging from dark to light. But that Violet 2 is a good bit more blue. The pink has a similar result, but in the case of the pink, where's the pinks? The pinks start with what can almost be considered a very, very dark magenta and skip straight forward to an almost red. It's in between red and magenta, and then it just gets lighter from there. Well, let me go ahead and put these back. Yes, I had to get 5 containers like this to store my watercolors because I did not have any means of storing them, and I did not have room for the nail polish racks that could. So, Mark, you ready to see me finish an Aslan? This is one I started last week, but I had to cut short because I was just like falling asleep on my face. Just okay. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to do my usual, and here is our Aslan current state. And we've got his mantle, his the chest piece of what's going to be his jacket. And what we're going to do is we're going to make the rest of his jacket right now. This is going to be almost like a diplomat. Fancy dress, the whole 9 yards. We're hiding this arm so that we can make it easier. And so next is going to be the tail of the jacket coming out from under that, the breast of the jacket, I guess you could say. So we're going to turn on transparency so we can make sure let's go ahead and turn on to remember sizes. That is an extremely useful little thing they've added where you remember draw size per brush. And we're also going to turn off Lazy Mouse because we'll be using this later on. Now, what we're going to do, hold down Control, bring that focal shift over. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And then we're just going to sit here and kind of draw a nodule there to make it easier to clean up into a sharp edge. Bring this around. Now that's going about there, so about here. Now let's clean this up by erasing. And actually we need to kind of come from here. Oh yay, I forgot. He still had the shading on him from the other. So we got to start this over again. So we're going to kind of come down back. And we're going to cut it a little sharp just to make it I'm going to come a little bit straighter down. And then straighter down. Needs to go a little bit further down. And then from here, kind of come back around this way. And we're going to clean this up. Now, down here, we're going to add in what's going to be a little split in the back, like a coat would have. And we're going to do this pretty much the exact opposite way. We're going to clean up the edges down below. Okay, now let's clean up that bottom of it. And add in there. Just to protect it a bit. And now we're going to clean this up. Okay, and now we give it a bit of depth so that we can blend it when we extract it. So, for example, let's bring this a little bit further under. And give it some mass. And okay. Now, let's turn off transparent. Zoom out a bit. Straighten them up. And then we're going to Control Shift click to bring the arm back. And now we go to extract, and we're going to extract 0.012. That'll do. No, that won't do. 0.02. No, that won't do. 0.018. Accept. Draw. Draw. Now, just to make sure that we keep the split, we're going to have to Dynamesh a lot smoother than we normally do. Oh, we got to first of all do it on the jacket, not the critter. It's going to be, let's see, 6. $378. Dynamesh. Nope. No. No. 512. There we go. That's good enough. And we are going to have to do quite a bit of smoothing on this. And flattening of the smoothing. And flattening of the smoothing and the stuff in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a good. Yay. And then we go down to here until we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and then there's a quick smooth under here. And now we're going to smooth out this. Bring it down to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then a quick just a cut down. And then over here we need to kind of blend this quite a bit. That's going to be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there we go. That's good enough. Now, we're going to give it a divide a couple times to make sure it's a high res. Come back up to him. Geometry, merge, down, always okay. Geometry, Dynamesh. Now, smooth this out. Okay. We're also going to go in here with inflate, set it to negative. And we're going to very gently start bringing it in under that area. Make sure that the detailing stays where it needs to be. And in here. And then here. Okay. Now let's frame out just to get a better look at him. Okay, now we need to give him arm cuffs. Okay. Alright. So we're going to zoom in. And we're going to start this off by making it as if we're making bracers. We're going to make a bar there. And here. About the same width. That was too much. That'll do. And we're going to extract about 0.02. Accept. Now before we do anything else, we're going to smooth out the arm at the elbow. Then we're going to rechange this to add, make it bigger, and very carefully just kind of make it clear this is more of a sleeve and less of an arm. Now, one, dun, 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 and then we're gonna smooth that down because we don't need that sticking up. Frame out. Next thing we're going to do, I'm actually going to grab those ears and pull them out to the side a little bit. Just enough to get it a little bit out of the hair. Okay. Now we need to give him boots of some kind. We're going to hide the base while we do this. And what we're going to do is we're going to make them kind of small shoes, so to speak. Okay. And now we're going to shrink this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, we'll go up a little bit higher. Gonna give it just a little bit of a dip. We're gonna add buckles across the that one's too small. We're gonna end up adding buckles across the toes for an almost pseudo 17th century look. To match how his jacket is like pseudo 17th century with some tech flares that we're going to be adding on. No, let's extract those. No, we want them at 0.0125. Accept. Draw. Draw. Before we do anything with those toes, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to make these pants mid-calf. So, and they're going to go bushy. What I mean by bushy is they're going to be all puffy and stuff at the point where they end. Okay, now 0.02, extract, accept, draw, draw, Now these, we go down to geometry. Dynamesh at 256, the usual. And then we're gonna smooth them out. We're going to end up putting like a little string around the base. But again, that'll be after we get these on. We're going to divide them a couple times. One more. And just Dynamesh. And smooth out the seams. Now they're going to be a little tighter up near the top because, you know, that's the way that style of pants were. They were tight up the top and baggy right at the knee. Okay. Now, I cannot guarantee that the okay, so visibility hide points, because those were not supposed to be made. Hide points. Geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Yeah, there we go. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take both of these shoes and make a band across the top. We're not going to bother with erasing the underside of these bands because they will be going into the base. No, we need to Dynamesh it first. Geometry. Dynamesh, we're going to Dynamesh these 512. And then 1, 2, okay, that should be good enough for a nice sharp. Okay, now for this one, we're going to have to be kind of careful. Actually, we're going to have, I know what we're going to do. We're going to extract this one at 0.01. Accept. Draw. Then we're going to draw this one, and we're going to make the other invisible just for a moment. We're not going to delete hidden this time. because what we need to do is we need to actually sit there and make this band while also not... Oh wait, no, that's too much. There we go. There we go. Subtool. Extract, accept, draw, and draw. Then we're going to merge these down on top of each other. Merge down. Now, unlike the usual buckles, these won't have the full buckle. It'll just be a block with a piece missing in the center. So the way we're going to do this, turn on transparency, make sure we're on the toes. We're just simply going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're going to draw on. Actually, no, we don't want it there. We want it kind of at an angle. There. And now here. And now we can turn off transparency because we don't need it. And we're going to extract 0.015. Extract, accept, draw, draw. Okay, and we have our buckled shoes. And when we turn on the base, it becomes a lot more clear that it's buckled shoes. There we go. Alright. Excuse me. Now, the way we're going to do around these ankles here. Well, first let's fuse all these shoe bits together with merge down. Okay. Now the way we're going to handle the string around the base is we're actually going to use seam 16. As funny as that may sound to some of you who know exactly what this does. The reason being is because it will represent that the string is up under this seam. And let's just see which way do we go. Okay, we're going to go the other way. We're also going to have to turn, make it a bit smaller. Now the thing is, we are leaving, I have to make it actually a bit bigger. Maybe a little bit lower. We are leaving Smart Mouse on. Okay. Because what we're doing is we're going to have to make this as a nice even stroke. And then okay. Then we're going to be poofing that out. We're then going to add in some string on the side. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use slash add cancel. I don't want to go Z. Turn off lazy mouse and shrink it down quite a bit. Actually, no, better yet. Let's go layer and change the alpha to that one. And shrink it down quite a bit. What we're going to do, actually, let's put it in the front. Let's put it right. Alright, that's not enough. Nope. Nope. Oh, it's going to be a 87. There and down here. Now, before we do any kind of wrinkles or poofing, we're going to do the poofing first, but before we do any of the wrinkles, we're going to be putting in our seams onto the actual there. Making it a bit more clear that it's tied off at that point by doing this. You don't ever really want to have your painters guessing why you did something. You know, what is this supposed to be? It should tell a story, and that story should explain everything that you can about the figure, including his personality. In some cases, the clothing alone helps do that, like what's happening with this guy. You can see he's a bit of a fop. Combined with his rather arrogant stance, he's very definitely a duelist or a some other kind of arrogant upper class. Give him a smirk, while at the same time a bit of a sneer down on this side. There we go. Not the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Okay. Now, before we add in the actual wrinkles, we're going to add in the seams. And this time, we're going to check out some of the seams that I've got in my light box. Brush. And that would be too. Now, some of these would be decent as a sci-fi seam. Some of them as just a sort of, let's go with seam 10. And we're going to take this particular one. We're going to turn on transparency so we can see what we're doing. We're going to kind of come. Oh, that tells me what I need to know. Come up from here. And looking at it, no. It's going to be too small, too detailed. Let's go back with 16. And I'm going to shrink it some and increase the intensity. No. We need to come that way. And then from here, there. Then, oh, there, and up this way. Oh, no, down this way. Then we're going to come around and under the arm for the sleeve. And since it'll be covered up by that, this one, however, won't be. We come down under the arm. And there. Then, oh, no, it goes up. I'm going to hide the hand. Just long enough for us to do that. Then we have our seams. And give me just a moment here. Okay, still only got a few people watching, so I'm going to go ahead and go back into the sculpting. Alright, we have our seams, and I was thinking we need to add another seam. It needs to be a little bit smaller and a lot weaker. And it's going to be for trim along the bottom edge of the jacket. So we're going to turn transparency back on, make it a little bit smaller again. Now, do we go this way? Yes. And then from here, then so I've recently been trying to teach my 71-year-old mother how to use a tablet. It's been fun. Her biggest problem is getting the right amount of pressure. And once again, we're going to hide the hands so we can get in here. Sometimes she presses too hard. Sometimes she presses too light. So getting the right amount of pressure is kind of tricky for her. And when she presses too hard, of course, what this means is it opens up all those special menus. There we go. Got the jacket trim done. Let's go ahead and give it one more lightweight. One more lightweight trim up the back. Okay. So, we have his basic outfit ready and done. Frame out. We have our duelist, our arrogant duelist Aslan ready. Yeah, it's easier when you have it all one color. Now let's zoom out and make sure that these details will be visible at a printed figure. That's a little bit smaller than a figure. There we go. According to this, yep, they will be definitely visible on a resin printed figure, including the little ties in front and the buckles on the shoes. Now if we zoom out a bit more, we can try and see if they'll be visible on a well printed FDM. And some of them are subtle, but they will be visible. Even the detailing that we added to the gun will be moderately visible, even on resin. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. So now it's time to add our wrinkles. Oh, she knows Facebook. She's had Facebook before. She loves Google, Wikipedia, and IMDb. Mostly because she loves fact-checking any newsman. Doesn't matter whether it's CNN, Fox, BBC. If she hears something that doesn't sound quite right to her, she goes and double checks it. She does not have a big problem with confirmation bias, thankfully. She checks sources and makes sure that what they're saying is correct. She also loves IMDb because she's always, oh, who was it who played that one role in that movie with the thing in the place? So, yeah. Okay, we're going to start off with our clay buildup tool to work on making these wrinkles. And, of course, we're going to have to make this a lot smaller. So we're going to shrink this down. being a bit tight, what's going to happen is we're going to have a lot of smaller wrinkles. And they're going to be a bit more intense. We're going to come back for that, for the detailing. Alright, we're going to... Don't want to have... Actually, we want to turn Lazy Mouse back on and give it a decent radius. Not a long one, but a decent one. Okay. We're going to kind of come in here. And kind of bring these up to there. Now, we're going to deal with these wrinkles very differently. Now, we're going to go to slash 1, 2, and we're going to just kind of brush over the ends of these wrinkles a little bit, just to smooth them out and end them a bit more succinctly, or less succinctly, rather. And there we go. Now, 1, 2. Z sub, drop this down to about 13. And then we're just going to kind of very gently go under each of these. Okay. Now, let's thank the dev team for undo. No matter what program you're in, it's a godsend. Okay, now we're going to add in See, add, we're going to bring it down to 8. We're going to increase the size just a little bit because it'll help us. And we draw on the bottom. It'll help us define them as wrinkles and not as lumps or seams. Because what it'll do is it'll draw it all in. One thing to remember is we do it on the bottom of the wrinkle, not along top or center. Okay. Frame out, and the pants look nice and tight with enough wrinkle to pull off being a heavier fabric like gabardine. And now we're going back to sub, back to 15, and we're going to just kind of give in some of these tighter areas around where it's tucked in to this string. Going back to add and dropping it down to 9, and we're going to, each one of these is going to be a bit of a loop actually with it. Well, some of these are going to be loops. This is actually going to be a W. Okay. And those pants are exactly where we want them. Now we want the suit coat to be a heavier, thicker fabric. So instead of these small wrinkles that we used, we're going to use larger ones. And we're not going to be quite as intense with it. So we're going to drop it from 20 to 14. The reason I chose 14 is because, hey, it's a nice number. It's kind of like not quite 2/3. And we're going to kind of wrinkle them. Coming down like that. we're going to wrinkle this way. And here is going to come down like that. There. Now we're going to smooth them because we want these to be a bit more, a bit more flowing and swooping, and we're going to refine them with the flash brush. So that's one reason why I really don't go out and get too many brushes. Some of these brushes are just too useful, and you can find them on Gumroad. These seam brushes, for example, are just way too useful to try and get away without. But there's some specific cloth wrinkle brushes out there that, they're too unique and I can't justify them. Because, I'd rather show you how I do it, and then if you find a better way, cool. 14. Now it's going to come out. You'll notice that I'm only putting the deep cuts near the base of these wrinkles. These wrinkles don't stay sharp across the surface like the other ones did. Instead, they kind of, because of the heavy fabric, they lose their fold relatively soon and become more of a warp in the shape of the fabric. I didn't want to use that term because that's actually a weaving term. You've got warp and weft, and that determines the grain of the fabric, so to speak. Okay, now we're going to go to add and drop this back down to 8. And as before, we're only going to be doing this kind of like near the bottom base of these wrinkles. This is a heavier fabric. Once again, we're going near the bottom of these wrinkles, the base and the bottom. Because gravity affects even cloth. Frame out. And there we go. Well, we've got to refine the hands. And maybe add in some decorative fluting in the breast piece. So with the hands, one of the things that we are going to do is we are going to use the move tool. We're going to carefully move this hand out so that it's not so embedded into the gun. We're also going to the inflate tool. Make sure we bring this down to about 10. Yeah, that'll do. And I'm just going to give it a bit. Okay, now going back to slash sub intensity 14, we're going to shrink this down and reinforce the division between the fingers and thumb, because we lost that division in a couple of these dynameshes we've done. Okay. A little bit bigger. There we go, that's good. I could see this being used in the, printed out 3 times size and used as a statue of a local hero or something. So we go back to inflate, and we go, let's make it 1 step bigger. Now let's make this 12. Move that out. We're going to inflate the center of the hand. We've got a reason for that, and that reason is to make it a bit easier to print the hand by making the hand kind of solid in here. Let's hide the extra bits, and then hide the waist. There. So that we can get in here, and let's hide that and that in here, and inflate this part of the hand once again so we can make it easier to print. We want this printed, not just, oh, look at that, I wish I could print it. Okay. Now we're going to inflate the underside of the thumb. We're going to use move topological. Bigger. Now drag that thumb over. Because the thumb was a bit too far away originally. Then we're going back to inflate We're going to inflate in between. We're only going to define a couple of the knuckles because we don't need to define the others since they're in contact with the waist. And then just to give it some interest, we're going to slash there and there, and then make sure we redefine the division of the fingers, which has nothing to do with Division Bell, by the way, which is a album I'm not a huge fan of, but I can understand the importance of it. I mean, yeah, it's who it was, but it's also, it was towards the end and it wasn't that great, really. It was good, not great. Cut where the fingers are, or not cut as much as define. Frame out. Okay, and now we make everything else visible. And here is our Aslan Ambassador. Well, we can define a little bit more on the nose. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to geometry and we're going to give it one level of subdivision, lower. And we're going to inflate. There it is. Shrink it a little, and we're going to inflate. Well, we're going to inflate this significantly to close it up. We're going to inflate the upper lip quite a bit. And then we're going to inflate the lower lip only on the front, because it is a cat. We're also going to inflate the front of the nose. Then it's time for slash. And I don't mean, you know, Guns N' Roses. Slash, Z sub, Z14, okay. Now, come down from the nose, and then under this lip, and under this lip. That. Now we're going to come in from under. Actually, we need to make it smaller for this. From under here. There's our nose a bit more defined, and now we're going to define the eyes once again. And come back around this way. Now, normally for a patron sculpt, I'd have the patron in the chat answering questions about these sculpts, like pose, hair, expression, etc. But this particular patron was unable to make any kind of time frame that would be usual for this because of, you know, his time zone. So instead, it was pretty much just make an Aslan from Traveler. So here we go. Here is a Traveler Aslan, ready to be printed and used as your arrogant duelist or ambassador or what have you. And let me make sure that I've got that base defined. No, I need to subdivide it a couple times. In case you're wondering, I'm looking at the resolution there of that base, and I need to zoom out. As you can see, it's actually a deep grading. So now merge down, 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 down. Frame. And there's one thing, there's one thing I forgot to do. We go back to layer, change from dots to drag dot, and bring it up to 100%. I forgot to give him cufflinks. So we're gonna put them, no, it need to be bigger than that. There and there. And then there and there. And then I'm going to use /add 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just to make it a bit more artsy with the collar, with the frame out. There we go. Now, geometry, resolution, change that to 1024, and Dynamesh. We're at 1.9 million. We kept our nice definitions of most of these details. We can go to these areas here and smooth them just a bit, because they didn't. It was a lower poly than I expected when I added them. Okay, now frame out. Frame. Zoom out a little bit. Z plugin. Decimation master, and we're going to make him 50,000 points. That's 100,000 triangles. Writing file to disk, and there we go. 100,068 triangles and 50,000 points exactly. So let's go ahead and under geometry, under modify topology, let's just make sure. Let's close holes, which added 75 points and quite a few triangles, and then weld points, which took us down back below 1,000. That pretty much closed all the holes that may have been left behind from the decimation process. So now, export Aslan Ambassador. Now it exported as OBJ, and later on tonight I'll be changing it to STL. But yay! That is our Aslan Ambassador. Ugh, excuse me. Bing! Now, you will notice someone just woke up. Someone is coming down from the back bookcases to come say hi. Oh, careful, buddy. Yeah. Here is my little Carlton. Did you hurt yourself jumping up here, Carlton? One thing about holding cats, if you hold them like a shelf, like they can jump off at any time they want, they tend to stay up there longer. If you grab them and hold on to them, they'll squirm and try to get away. Isn't that right, baby? Isn't that right? Yeah. He's a little quiet tonight. Yeah, he's about to fall asleep. Oh, he's so feral. So feral. Alright, little buddy. You had to say hi. And now it's time to put you back down on the ground. Alright. Good night, little buddy. I'll see you in a few minutes when the show's over. Good boy. Carlton hasn't been on for a while. He was getting kind of jealous. So, well, that was the Aslan. It would have been a single show figure if I hadn't have kind of crashed halfway through last week. Now, I started off the show, y'all weren't here, and I showed off what I have done with the war colors. And gee, as you can tell from these fingers, I've kind of been painting most of the day. War colors are just funky. What I did was I took 3 of my painting practice figures that I've made, and I primed them in white, as you can see by the white ring around the base, a medium gray, and a black. And despite the come on. Yeah, it's not. There it goes. Despite the 3 different primers, it's extremely difficult to tell what was what. The only way you can really tell is if you know where to look on the face. Yep. These are not done. As you can see, their eyes are just blank sockets right now. One thing I noticed was that their inks from watercolors are extremely glossy. It really affected the hair and the robe. I mean, the robe, you can't really tell. Yeah. There's a lot more shading than the photographs make it look. But that gloss kills it. There's no inks on the gem, but there's actually some ink on the face. Michael, I've been painting gems like that since 1987. Almost always red or green. Anyway, the intent is that once I'm done, the belt rim and the face of the shield will be repainted, like this one has, in the color that I had primed it. White, gray, or black. I still need to touch up the eyes. And, what else was I planning on doing? I think that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. The eyes are pretty much all that's left, and then and the nails in the wood planks. Now, I've been painting miniatures in general since about 1984. Back then, it was paint it a color and give it a wash of black. A thin wash, a wash of black. And if you were using poly-S paints, which poly-S are still around. They're watercolor-based paint. Glass bottles, the old screw-off cap. And you use the cap and dip your paint. But they were roughly equal to the apple barrel style and ceramcoat style paints that I now consider to be best used as a handle while painting. The paint was about equal to this stuff. And then I discovered White Dwarf. And within the pages of White Dwarf, I saw the works of John Blanche, the Perry brothers, and more. And yeah, and the minute I saw the heavy metal sections of games of White Dwarf, and back then, as you know, there weren't the multitude of YouTube videos and channels to learn how to paint. You had to pretty much guess by what you're reading and how it says they did it in White Dwarf, in the Games Workshop books, and it's like, okay, a dry brush, just a dust. Okay, that probably means the brush is mostly dry. Oh yeah. I mean, I did another figure using only watercolors on the same figure. But what I did with him was I tried to paint him over a zenithal priming, and I tried to keep the zenithal, and it didn't come out as good as I'd hoped. I mean, already just looking at them face to face, the only advantage of the finished ones so far is that he's got the shading around the mouth and the cheeks that I haven't added to this yet. Yeah. A trick that I do, thin down blue ink considerably, build up a few layers in the area where the beard is. Thin down red ink, put it on the nose tip and across the cheeks. And you don't want red ink as in, where is it? Yeah, here it is. You don't want red ink in the manner of, like, this red wash from Viejo, which is actually a dark red that shades it. You want bright red, clear ink. That's just going to add a tinting of red. And then the blues, most blues are like this. I haven't seen very many blue inks other than the blue shade from Army Painter that aren't just straight up blue ink. But I find interesting is that a technique that John Blanche is described as using in White Dwarf in like White Dwarf 79, White Dwarf 80, White Dwarf 81 is blending the paints on the miniature. And that's something that back then most of us were like, oh, that's just too much. Whoa, that's just ridiculous. And now, wet blending, two brush wet blending, loaded brush technique, all of them variations on mixing the paint on the figure. But I remember when I was competing in miniature contests in the 90s, the most common technique was layering for the higher end shading. I mean, we would start with a base coat, give it a wash, and then layer out to the highest point. I had 8 dedicated bottles of paint for flesh tones. It would start at a tone a little bit darker than this Warcolors Brown one. It was kind of almost... That's actually... No, that's not. It was almost equal to this fur brown. And I would paint there. I would give it a wash into the eye sockets, the mouth line, and the laugh lines. And then build up in layers, 8 layers, to a very pale flesh tone that was similar to this flesh too. It's not as white as this looks, trust me. It's just... I mean... And then of course you had the eyes, and the techniques I was using for painting eyes are one of the most common things I'm seeing online now, and that's, you take it, you paint the eye sockets dark brown, you paint a thin strip of white, dab it with black, or not so much black, but like the darkest color of what you're wanting, like black for the irises, no, but dark blue, yes. Then you'd go back in and on top of the eye paint over that dark brown again and a slightly lighter shade under it. And that's what I'm seeing now for painting eyes. One thing that wasn't very common where I was, at least in back then, is something I'm seeing a lot of now, and that's non-metallic metal. I remember when I was painting consistently, the only time I ever saw non-metallic metal was in the mediocre paint jobs in the illustrations for 2nd edition Battle System from D&D. Look it up if you can. It's just very, very flat, like, paint it gray, paint white zigzags, paint black zigzag, or dark gray zigzags, and there, non-metallic metal. Nowhere near the amount of intensity that you see nowadays with people like, oh god, Vince Venturella, and, the people on, Miniac. I'm not a fan of him as a person, but he's still some good technique. So yeah. Oh, Miniac has this one video where he does this kind of late Gothic period breastplate on a figure that's got that, the pot belly breastplate. And oh my god, it looks great. My problem with non-metallic metal, if it's for a diorama or a scenario, fine. It looks great. But if it's on the tabletop, moving around and shifting and changing angles with other figures, no. Because then you've got different points of different lighting facing each other, and it loses the illusion. Now, on the other hand, you can use the non-metallic metal techniques with the metals. You start off with almost a black iron, and you build up through your plate mail and your shining steel and your bright silver, and then finally your metallic white on the absolute edges, that kind of thing, using the techniques of non-metallic metal. Yeah, that ends up looking great, and it's a lot more forgiving with different lighting directions. I mean, really and truly, the gem technique works best with non-metallic metal paint jobs, because again, it's got directional lighting. You can change what direction is the highlight on this gem, as opposed to always being the underside and having one little white dot just off center. But yeah, I'm gonna have to give all three of these a coat of the included matte varnish, except not on the metals. Matte varnish on metals always ruins them. Not on the metals, and an additional coat of gloss on the gemstones. Yeah. Have you seen my painting practice figure before, Michael? Now, gloss varnish on some metals works. Alright, the idea behind this sculpt is that it has skin, cloth, rigid and male metals of at least two different kinds, leather, hair, wood, and the facing of the shield can be used for freeform painting. The inside of the shield can either be painted metal like I did, or painted in handmade wood grain. It's got almost every single basic fantasy material type I could think of. It doesn't have plastic, but it's medieval, it's fantasy. And it's a nice, broad, flat, open pose. The only thing that's a little bit difficult to get to is the back of the pouch on the hip over here. Otherwise, everything is wide open. Yeah, the one I painted before, I added on just a quick heraldry. And the gem, so you can practice the gem. It is literally intended for the sole purpose of practicing. Although I guess you could end up making an entire military unit of sword and shieldmen. Yeah. So, earlier this week, someone on... It's not on my store, it's on my Thingiverse page. Down there. A lot of my sculpts that I do are on the Thingiverse. And, for example, if I do it on a Tuesday or Thursday, it's almost certainly on Thingiverse. My Gumroad store is mostly the Kickstarters that I've started, plus some critters like the Tarrasque, which if you're a patron you already get through the Patreon. The Verbal Dabberwalk, and the Hydra. Yes, I have a multi-headed Hydra in a Gumroad store down there. But on Thingiverse, I've got over 120 things on there, ranging from my nigh on legendary gaming case book, room for miniatures and life counters, dice, pencils, tablet, and it's a dice tower when you stand it up. I've used this for twice a week for over a year now. And I've even got dice towers. Like this one here, for druids. I mean, I've done some things. I mean, this is on there. Although I do know someone who has made a remix with the face of these discs being blank, so you can put whatever you want on them. I have also literally used that every day since I made it. And there's Carlton again. As he's probably getting ready to go snooze. Shinju is not on this bed and right now, mostly because we just got a new cat tree. And she has to reinforce that she is queen of the cat tree. We got rid of the old one because it was literally falling apart. Part of my goal, Michael, is to help other people see that they can do it too, that what I'm doing is not as complex as it seems. I mean, the wrinkles, all I did was a bulge, then dig in, and then put a sharp line on top. It's not that hard once you get in your head that it doesn't have to be exactly photoreal when you scale it down to miniature size. I mean, kind of hard to see when it's clear. This is what I did Thursday. This is my flesh golem. He definitely does not have human proportions. Not with the size of the hands and the feet and the bulgy head and all that. But yeah, he came out really nice. See, I came into sculpting for 3D printing already owning several programs that were practically ideal. Because since 2001, I've been making content for a hobbyist 3D program called Daz Studio, and before that, Poser. So I've had 3D Studio Max to do the base geometry. I've had ZBrush to do the detail sculpting. I've had Daz Studio, which is what I use to rig my geometry in. The figures that you see me working with are not figures from Daz. They are my own geometry that I have rigged in Daz. And then, for example, when I made the Tarrasque, which I don't have a copy printed here, I took it into the local game shop. I created the base geometry for that Tarrasque in 3D Studio Max and rigged it in DAZ Studio before adding all the details. It took a few sessions online on broadcast. You can see back deeper in my record. If I had nothing and was a hobbyist and was getting ready to start right now, I'd probably start with both Blender and Sculptress. The reason for Sculptress is because it's currently owned by the same people that make ZBrush. And it may not be the same, but it can give you a feeling, an idea on sculpting. I know Blender just added sculpting. I also know that not this computer, but the one that I had before it. I replaced this computer at the beginning of the year. My computer crashed every time I tried to open the sculpting. It was a 9-year-old computer, so that may be why, but yeah. Now the big advantage of ZBrush, which is what I use in these videos, yes, it's $900 US. I bought my copy in 2005, 2006. Every single official update since, including full version updates, has been free. 2006 to 2019, 13 years of updates, and every single one was free. And they've even started using the words perpetual license for the standard price of ZBrush. They've never officially come out and said, until recently, if you buy ZBrush, you get it forever. They've just been doing it. And now they're saying something to the effect of their licenses are perpetual licenses. Which I like far more than the subscription model. The monthly fee, if I wanted to upgrade, the 3D Studio Max version I'm using is 2011. If I wanted to upgrade to the current edition, it's $300 per month. My usual technique before was I'd save up for 2 or 3 years, buy a version, use it for 2 or 3 years, buy a version, use it for 2 or 3 years, buy a version, instead of bang, 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 because I can't afford a new version every year. Now there are some subscription models that I like. Substance Painter, which I've used to make texture maps before. Its subscription model is more like rent to own. You know, once your subscription has reached you've paid a certain amount, you can choose to get, bam, you've got a license for that edition of this program. And even if you end up defaulting, you still have that edition of this program. So, some subscription models work. Algorithmics with Substance Painter. Others, screw Autodesk. If it wasn't for Mesh Mixer, I'd just give them the finger and tell them to sit and spin and never leave me alone for the rest of my life. But anyway, so I've got a couple new patrons recently, and I've had a couple of them respond to my contacts about doing a miniature. So hopefully next week we've got. Hopefully next week we've got going to have both shows with patrons ready to sculpt some interesting and weird new figures. I did notice that a while back that some of the people were trying to challenge me and push me and make me do something I hadn't done before, or cram as much detail as possible to a small thing. Because if you look at some of the oldest stuff I've sculpted, and you compare that to even a simple figure like today's Aslan, there is, even though it's based on the same geometry, the same proportion, it's night and day. I mean, it's seriously a big difference. The reason why? Practice. I'm sculpting at least 4 times a week, not counting sculpts that I'm doing for Patreon, not Patreon, Kickstarters, for commissions, and things like that. So, just wow. Now, I did have someone in the Discord ask me how to get a second sculpt after they've already had their patron sculpt. The answer is a commission. Honestly, if I gave everyone like one sculpt every 6 months, and I eventually somehow managed to get up to Duncan Luca level of Patreonhood, which it's both simultaneously depressing and inspiring, I would never stop sculpting Patreon miniatures, because he's got so many patrons. It's like every night, okay, who's tonight? Okay, let's go. Okay, this is your 5th one? Okay. Now, I'm going to pull up a picture. Some of the, this is going to be basically one of the inspiration figures for what's coming next from me. Okay. And we'll see what you think of it. Say hello to ancient Babylon. The current plan is that it'll start off with the palace and the high temple, and then stretch goals for things like city blocks with a... by the way, the palace and the high temple both will include full versions of just raw exterior, ruins, and layered versions you can take the layers off of and see the layout inside for like placing your figures in the game. Then will also be the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, exterior, interior, and ruins. Character models, monsters and statues, and eventually the Tower of Babel, which can again be done as exterior, removable sections interior where you can see the inner layout, ruins, and a Tower of Babel dice tower. It's not just Babylon. It's going to be Babylon, Assyria, Sumer, Ur, Uruk, general ancient Mesopotamia. I'm calling it Forgotten Empires. Now, there might be a little bit of Egyptian thrown in, mostly for things that we don't really have archaeological examples of, like the furniture and bedding. Some of what they used, we aren't really certain. Like, did they just use a pallet of blankets for their bed, or did they use like a raised divan with a shaped piece of wood as a pillow, the way the Egyptians did? Now, it's going to be a while, because I've got a lot of work to do just for even the first pack. And currently it's divided up. It's going to eventually be 10 different stretch goals. So they're going to be a lot smaller steps, but a lot more of them. As an example, some of the miniatures are going to be legendary hero miniatures, highly detailed character models that will include living and undead versions, as well as stylized statues and ruined statues of the same characters. Almost all of the human and monster figures will include undead versions, and many of the monsters will also have statues and ruined statues. Or like I did with Roland and Beowulf, I made miniatures of these legendary heroes. But there's going to be like Gilgamesh and Enkidu, Lugalbanda, and possibly characters inspired by Marduk, etc., etc. I'm not going to do Tiamat. Everyone who hears Tiamat in modern gaming immediately thinks dragon with 5 heads of each different color. And Tiamat actually was more like just a generic sea monster. She was the first true sea monster, like a sea dragon for all intents and purposes. It's Tiamat and Apsu represent the saltwater ocean and the sweetwater ocean. Sweetwater being freshwater. And they were the parents of the monsters, and that's why both Apsu and Tiamat had to be slain. There's so much in the depths of that mythology. I've been studying mythology since I was 5. I know the Western mythologies, the classic Greek or Greco-Roman, Norse, Celtic, and Egyptian almost inside and out. I know quite a bit about the celestial bureaucracy in China, some of these Shinto deities like Amaterasu and Mikami, the ancient Mesopotamian beliefs, and you'd see things like Astarte becoming Athena over time. And then bits and pieces of random things from various other nations, like the Ayamucha from Saharan Africa, some of the beliefs of Pacific Islanders in early days, and some of the Native American beliefs. Of course, Hindu, or not Hindu, Hindu. The Trinity of Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. So yeah, I've been studying mythology for a long time. There's an interesting thing. There's a story in Japanese myth that is repeated in several smaller random areas around the globe. And it's such a weird freaking thing. The goddess of the sun hides in the cave. And another goddess makes everyone else laugh, causing the goddess of the sun to come out and see what's going on by showing off her huge pudenda, her huge mons veneris, and just spreading it, going, "Hey, how are you today?" That story is all over the globe, in all these tiny little pockets at random places. And it's such a weird story. I mean, a flood story being at random areas around the globe. Yeah, because almost every culture knows what a flood is. You know, the Tigris and Euphrates rise up, and oh, we got flooded. You know, the Mediterranean water level rises. Oh, we got flooded. The Reed Sea water level rises. Oh, we got flooded. But a sun goddess being lured out of a cave because another goddess was playing with her vagina. That's something interesting I've just read, that apparently they've deciphered. Pre-Abrahamic Israelites believed in an overgod and his sons and daughters, the lesser gods, who were gender neutral. But unlike them being like the sun god, the god of agriculture, the god of war, no, their portfolio wasn't a concept. Rather, that was the god of the Canaanites. That was the god of the Babylonians. That was the god of the Israelites. That was the god of the Samaritan. Each subgroup had a patron god. And originally, one of the names used for God in the Old Testament was the name for the God of the Israelites, and that's why he's called the God of the Israelites. Mm-hmm. And that's also why the first commandment is, "You shall have no other gods before me." He's not saying there aren't any other gods. He's saying that you're the Israelites, I'm your patron, you won't worship anyone but me. That's why he's a jealous God. That's why he had no problems with when the Israelites were conquering the Holy Land, when they agreed to let another group of people join them, but only if they circumcised themselves, and while they were writhing in the agony of having circumcised themselves, they killed them all. Because they were originally the followers of another god, their tribal patron, and by joining the Israelites, they had to turn away from their own god. Mm-hmm. But it's also the Nephilim. It gives new insight into them. They weren't the sons and they weren't the children of angels and mortals. They were the children of the tribal gods and mortals. They were demigods. And these were the heroes and the great men of old, to quote the Bible. Like Hercules, Perseus, Theseus, etc. Okay, it's 9:58. It is really time for me to go ahead and say goodnight. I will be here on Tuesday night unless something happens. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I will be here. And so I'm going to do my usual. I'm going to hold up my hand, count from 5 to 1, and when I get to 1, I'm going to do my usual dad joke. Today's dad joke will be in honor of Father's Day. And yes, if I'm not a dad, does that mean that it's a I'm a faux pas? Hold on a second, I gotta reset this so I can... If I can't see the... There we go. So, I'm going to count from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I make my joke and go... And then when I'm done, and I can see myself on screen going... I end the broadcast. So, that's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. How do you tell if Will Smith has been in your garden? You look for fresh prints.